This is the raw file, straight out of camera, loaded in Lightroom. All corrections are turned off with the exception of chromatic aberration. But I don't, at least I don't start with distortion and vignette correction. I also don't do that much to my images. I'm gonna warm this up a touch. Yeah, that looks fine. And then look for mid-tone exposure or luminance. And I mean, I'm pretty okay with that. I wish the sky wasn't so hot. That's just the way it looked though. I don't want to fake it. Anyway, it doesn't work because as I crank highlights down, the whole thing goes dark. Same thing again. I always start from the same starting point, which is directly out of camera. Lightroom is only doing two things by default when I import, and that's increasing sharpening while I suppose doing a touch of noise reduction as well, and chromatic aberration. Not that there's going to be any, makes no difference, but I just leave that on all the time anyway. I tend to jump down to, again, this luminance for midtones. However, no, I don't think that's the way I want to go on this one. In fact, if anything, I want to bring them down a touch. This one may be too warm. I don't know. Let's just see if I back it off a little. Yeah. I mean, I could get into split toning and whatnot, but again, I really don't do that much to my images. It's kind of a laziness thing, and it's kind of a being a purist thing. I don't know. It's kind of not having a lot of time, but it's also just kind of a philosophical preference for just being okay with whatever you've got. And I think that partially comes from shooting film, and I think that partially comes from just the way I originally learned as a photographer, working in a very high volume type of environment. And there just wasn't time to fix stuff. You just had to get it right the first time. So those little spots and things on the bottoms and edges of frames, I'll clean those up because they annoy me, and that's about it. 6 or 8 months ago, I switched to shooting RAW plus JPEG, with the intention of only using the JPEG. The RAW was not even there necessarily to edit should I decide to do so. It was more just if I got a shot I really liked, I wanted to have the RAW file. But overall, day to day, I don't want to spend any time editing. The one exception is that, and maybe this is why I kind of came back to just saying, okay, maybe overall it's easier just to work with RAW and leave JPEG out of it entirely, is that I don't always expose exactly the way I intend in the final image, which, I don't know, that might seem weird if you don't have a lot of experience editing. Exposing for a certain portion of the frame that is erring on the side of a specific detail, getting that exposed correctly, and, you know, be that the sky, and then everything's going to go dark, or you let the sky blow because you're exposing for some mid-tone or shadow detail like I did here. I was very concerned about losing this because I saw, oh, bright pop here, bright ridge here, and I thought, I'm just going to lose this. So I exposed a touch brighter than I actually wanted the image to be. So I've just brought it down a touch. It's really not even that much that I've brought it down. Let's see. Yeah, I think I intended it more like that. And yeah, that was probably the right call. Something like that. With earlier digital cameras, I always exposed for the highlights, basically always. But as digital cameras have, of course, improved in their handling of highlight detail, it's not always necessary. So I certainly did not intend this to be my exposure. This is one of the reasons I came back to working with RAW files, because I would prefer to just take everything as bright as possible before anything clips, because then I'm getting the best signal to noise ratio, and then just back it off in post. So I subtract a full stop, and that's kind of what I was intending. And so I have a cleaner, slightly cleaner, probably imperceptibly cleaner, but cleaner nonetheless image than I would have if I had just exposed with a stop less in camera. So, I don't know. Granted, I don't like editing unnecessarily, but if I weren't chatting along, that would have taken me 1.5 seconds to accomplish, and I just figured that is an acceptable amount of time. This one I don't think I'm going to do anything to, at least not very much. Let me try to help it here where there's a shadow but not enough contrast. Yeah, that helped. This is not a case where I took an exposure that I intended to tweak in post, because every exposure is a compromise, but this is sort of a difficult exposure where I'm shooting directly into the sun. I don't want to let the entire sky blow. White skies are boring, but that's not really why. It's because the impact of the burst here on an entirely white sky is just going to be greatly reduced. Of course, if I expose more for the sun, then everything below this line is just going to get really, really dark. And I do want the details here, so this was my compromise. And yes, I know about bracketing and whatnot, but just refer to everything I've said about not wanting to spend a lot of time editing, getting it right in camera. Bracketing is just not for me. It's not as though I'm opposed, I just am not interested. Again, directly out of camera. Again, a touch brighter than I intended. Just pushed my exposure a little to have more signal, less noise. Not digging the vignette, however, removing it entirely is not so great either. Removing it entirely, though, reveals this is a bit distracting over here. So maybe we do something about that. Let's see what that does. I'm fine with that. Let's bring some of this natural vignette, the actual character of the lens, back into it. Yes, that's less distracting over there. Could we go a bit warmer here? What are these spots? Might have to get rid of those. Don't know what that is. Probably something in the air. Bug or speck of dust. But I'm not sure. Yeah, something like that. Wait, let me go back a sec. See that cactus right in the middle? That's where I should have focused. It's not always clear to me in the moment, because I'm not that great at doing landscapes. And then there's this problem again. Always little things will sneak through. These little things that impinge upon the sides, tops and bottoms, corners of images. I just hate that. I try to keep those kind of detail free. Anything that will draw your attention just doesn't belong at the very edge of the frame. Those are borderline. I would probably be okay with leaving those, but why? Why should I? I'm taking care of these other ones. Let's just grab those ones as well. Otherwise, I haven't been using my trusty old mid-tone luminance, and that's because it's gonna really affect the sky in these images where I'm shooting directly into the sun. So I'm just gonna leave that where it is. However, I wonder if we did a little split toning, color grading here, where we warmed up the shadows and brought a little blue to the sky at the same time. It's a very subtle difference, but I think it's good. I think it helps. And I suppose something like that. Actually, maybe let's knock down that vignette. I'm fine with my lens distortion, by the way, almost all the time, including when shooting people. Because a lens should look a little distorted, at least to my way of thinking. That's interesting. After grabbing a few sunrise images, I stopped home to eat a little breakfast, have a little coffee, and then I'm heading back out again. Snapped a couple shots of my kitty. Something in this left eye of hers. I don't know, too much contrast or shadow or too little exposure. I'm not exactly sure what it is. But maybe I ought to be paying more attention to her eyes than the rest of the frame. Yeah, something like that, I guess. I'm not sure whether or not this bothers me. I guess it doesn't, because you have like something in every corner. It kind of almost looks balanced in that way. You wouldn't know it from moments like this, but my cat is actually pretty difficult to photograph. Normally she'll turn her head the second I point a camera at it. It's just in these little moments where she's too comfortable to actually move, I take advantage of it. Something like that, perhaps. Such a sweet kitty, though. In 2021, I started a time capsule. Just thinking how sad it is that kitties have such short lifespans compared to humans. Thought it might be fun, or possibly heartbreaking, one day to just have this resource of images of her that I've never seen. So if I get a really special shot or a group of shots, they just go right in the time capsule. These didn't qualify for the time capsule. I mean, they're fine, but I didn't get like a really special feeling when I was shooting them. I actually have a couple shots of my mom in there that I've never seen, and I lost her 8 months ago. Maybe I'll never look at them though. Just knowing that they're there, maybe that's enough. But I've been feeling really uninspired lately. Just whatever the photographer's equivalent to writer's block is, I definitely have that. But it's alright. It happens. Comes and goes. I've actually been fairly lucky in that regard the last handful of years. But it happens. I mean, I could quit for the day. Sometimes that's the best move, but you never know. Sometimes if you stick with it, you're rewarded. You end up working through it, getting something special. But other times you just end up frustrating yourself more, and then the harm that can cause is that maybe tomorrow you're a little less likely to get up and try again. From a composition perspective, I think of the left side of the frame here as being closed, intentionally so. I've framed it with a very clear boundary here. And I think of the right side of the frame as being open. Plus, I'm doing this thing that I think of as a balancing act, where I have like these defined shapes here, so I have to have something that calls your attention here to balance that out. I don't care for this glob of branches here, but of course there was no way to get that out. And I don't care for the trees being cut off at the top, but there was also no angle I could do that and still establish my boundary and have these reasonably straight. So this was a compromise. Yes, I could do some retouching, but it doesn't matter that much to me. For a client, I probably would. I'd spend the extra time and polish them up. But it's just an image for me. Doesn't matter at all. And I'm fine, again, with things just looking the way they look. Sure, I wish it were different, but it isn't. A couple of things are seeking undue attention here, so I'm going to get rid of them. Probably don't need to get rid of all of that. That top part's mostly what bothers me. But here, I'm in here doing it. Again, the stuff on the edge of the frame, I just don't like it calling attention to itself. This is super annoying, the top left corner. This wanted to hang down in front of these trees. I would step forward, I would step backward, I would get down lower, stretch up higher. I just couldn't get that out when I was framing the shot. So definitely taking that out now. And then we're a touch bright. I don't know, maybe a touch cool? I don't know. Nah, I don't really like warming up the sky. It's just these trees. Something like that. Blue to the sky. Yeah, it's better. It's better with the color grading. Many shots I just did absolutely nothing to. They're literally straight out of the camera. So, I need not go over those in tedious, excruciating detail. But for a minute there, I thought I'd found a theme, like interesting logs, framing them directly in the center of the frame. The problem is these are the only two I found. So although that sounded like a good idea at the time, it was a very short-lived concept or theme or something to get excited about. I was in a very dense area, but this open area jumped out to me as maybe potentially being an interesting photo, but I couldn't figure out a way to compose it, to kind of show what I was seeing with my eyes. Probably just needed a wider lens. But I'm also in the process of selling some gear, buying some gear, paying off the other gear before I buy another piece of gear, and I just don't own a very wide lens at this particular moment, but it's fine. That's not my go-to in very many situations. I'm not great with color. Maybe that also feeds into my lack of love for editing. I just do the best I can and try not to worry about it. The temptation to switch to entirely black and white photography, though, is strong with me. I think about that frequently. I really should do more of it, but then again, to set such a strict rule for myself, there's no need for that. Fall, autumn is coming up, and I'm really excited about capturing the fall colors. Maybe after that, though, maybe I'll have a black and white winter or something. Abrupt topic change. Why do I shoot landscapes with a shallow depth of field? Well, I'm glad you asked. I do it to communicate depth. And 9 out of 10 times, I'm going for an out-of-focus foreground, not an out-of-focus background. But true enough, that's not the norm. There are actually so many factors that go into it, and it's very much an instinct thing. Part of it is that I was brought up as a portrait photographer, not a landscape photographer. But I do sometimes shoot with very deep depth of field. Just depends on so many factors. Probably focal length is the biggest one. The wider I'm shooting, the deeper the depth of field I'm usually shooting with. I mean, that happens optically anyway, even if your lens is wide open. But I lean into that because I think that is the appropriate time when it looks good to have everything equally in focus. But on a shot like this, I really value the way shallow depth of field will communicate distance and the things that you stack on top of each other. They won't just become a blob of things. There will be a separation. But also, if you're into, like, I don't know, a nostalgic film look, if you're into lenses with character, that's when a lens has its most character. It's also where it performs the worst, generally speaking, but that lack of perfection, that is the character. You can't have it both ways. So yeah, another big reason I like to shoot wide open is because I get kind of flawed looking images, and that just feels right. It's the same reason I don't correct out distortion or even vignette a lot of times. That is just a property that a lens brings. And the more stuff you're correcting out or the more perfect the lens is, the less personality, character your shot's gonna have. And I would say this is a different category of imperfection as compared to, like, overexposing to improve your signal to noise ratio. Analog imperfections are charming. Digital ones are not, for whatever reason.